Hello, we're going to go into detail about the UDIMEditor plugin. First, we enable it by going to the plugins and typing UDIM and enable the UDIMEditor, make sure it's ticked, and then there is this reference viewer that was added in 5.4 or 5, I think. It tells you the plugins that are dependent on it. First one is editor scripting utilities. Make sure that's also enabled. Secondly, make sure geometry script or geometry scripting plugin is also enabled. This is for one of the utilities that we're going to talk about later in the video. And in the project settings, make sure to enable virtual texture support. Make sure it's enabled, and after you enable this setting and the plugins, you have to restart the editor. So after restarting, this button in the toolbar should be added, and you click it to open or launch the UDIMEditor. Now you may be overwhelmed by the sheer amount of icons and text. Don't worry, we were going to explain it step by step. First things first, this is a dockable window. You can dock it in many places in the editor. For the sake of this video, I'm going to resize it a bit so the content browser is going to be visible. That's where we're going to add our textures from. You got the main area there, and on the right there are the settings, and on the top we got the buttons. Each one does something. Let's filter out some of the textures. We're gonna get some 4K textures. We're gonna work on it. First, we're gonna check this base color. Then with the normal, gonna see why in a minute. Then the ORM, or known as occlusion roughness metallic. Some more textures. Gonna check this metallic as well. The roughness, the base color, and searching for more. Now, there are 3 ways to add those selected textures. First one is the import. Now, if you hover on any of the buttons there going to be a tooltip telling you what it's supposed to do. First method is the import button. Now we've pressed it. You can see that the textures have been added. But it's a bit small. I guess we're going to resize it to be more visible. Okay, we can also scroll in if it's not visible to you, for example. Using the mouse scroll, you can scroll in depending on the place your mouse cursor is on. And on the right in the settings, there are some related to the zoom in the zoom category. You may notice the text color on the textures. You can actually change the color of it, or if you change the alpha to 0, it's going to make it fully transparent, not visible. And this is what the tile text color on the right side does. I'm going to revert to the default value. And on the top, you can see the base color. This means that base color are the textures that have been added and viewed in this case. But if you remember, we actually added some normal maps and ORM, metallic and roughness. So why are they base color or albedo as added? Well, that's because it's one of the features of the plugin. It will try to automatically detect the other types of the textures. So if we change it to normal, we can see that the current selection is the normal. Speaking of normals, there is a special feature that is for normal maps. Now, if you hover on any of the textures, there will be a yellow line. That means you're currently hovering over this. And if you click it, it will become green. It means that you have selected it. And on the top right, the last selected texture would be shown. So the feature that I'm talking about is flipping the green channel. So it will flip the green channel of the selected textures. In this case, these two. And this might be useful for if you have an OpenGL textures, you want to flip them to DirectX. This is useful for that. Normally, it should do that for all normal maps in which the flip green channel setting is ticked in the texture setting and the individual texture when it's been imported. It should do that automatically, but in some cases, or if you have already made a UDIM, you want to change 1 or 2, or maybe even all of it back to DirectX, you can use this feature. Now we're going to talk about the other 2 methods in which you can add textures. The first one is by dragging and basically dropping it into the main window. Like this. Wait a bit. We selected one and this one is added. But this is one of the ways. But if you notice, look at the suffix or where the texture is ending with the the text, that's what it allows this plugin to detect different type of textures, and it's based on this. When you scroll down, you got this other texture array. In each of them, you got a couple of arrays inside also. These basically, the suffix is the type of texture. The suffix name is what allows it to detect the type. So we got NRM or normal or N. If it detects any texture with those suffixes, it will automatically add them to the normal map section. So make sure that textures that you're trying to add have correct suffixes, or if it doesn't exist, you can add the suffix yourself. Now, speaking of adding, the third method is clicking the Add Selected button. It is similar to the previous method. You just click a button here in this case, and it's adding it. Now from the drop down, let's change to other texture type. Let's see what it has detected. For ambient occlusion, only these 3 textures have been detected. And for emissive, only these 2. Have to scroll in to see those dots. For roughness, these all have roughness. And let's go back to base color. I think this is the easiest way to visualize, the easiest type. We got a fill type. This is good to add as a placeholder. For example, you don't have the texture now, but you're sure that you're going to need it in this place. You can add it now and then add the texture in its place later on. And what if you want to change the placement of textures? If you like drag the texture into another place, it should automatically insert it into that place that you have dragged it into, just as shown there. Another method, because the dragging and dropping gets very slow, or it lags a lot when there are lots of textures added. So alternatively, this button called Insert does the same thing, and it's much faster, although it depends on the order of selection. It is going to put the first one into the place of the second one, just like we just saw there. Similarly, we can swap between textures like this. It just swaps their places. So I hope the icons do a lot more sense now. There are some that I haven't talked about. Don't worry, we are going to talk about them as well. So what if you want to actually modify an already made UDIM? If you want to change any part of it or add it to another UDIM. So let's find the UDIM first. This one, this alien base color UDIM. It has 9 tiles, as seen there. I think this is a feature added in 5.5. You can see I can actually add it in any of the methods, any of the last 2 methods we talked about. Be careful that the import actually makes a new selection, so it deletes the previous one and adds the new ones on top of it, but the other 2 methods just added on top of it. Speaking of some settings, on the right side we got some settings. The first one is the path, where you want the texture to be, the final UDIM to be when you're baking it. By default, it will make this folder if it doesn't exist when you bake. You can change it to wherever you want. We're going to leave it at default. Another button we're going to talk about is extract. So if you have a UDIM, you want to extract 1 or 2 textures from it. So you select the textures that you want to extract. In this case, we have 3 selected already, but I think we're going to change the selection a bit. We don't need these 2. We just gonna extract the alien. An important setting is this sync with other types. This is what allows the other texture types like normal maps and others to be detected. If it's off, it will not detect them. So if it's selected and we click the extract selected, then we encounter this. We just click override, and as you can see, we only selected 2. So why are there so many textures extracted? Well, since the sync is on with it, that is what allows the other types to be extracted along with it. You can see. But if it is off, so for example, let's delete these first. I want to extract only the texture that I'm selecting. We turn the sync with other types off, and then we click the extract selected. You can see only the base color of both have been extracted. I'm going to turn them back on, and there is this extract all. This is going to extract every texture. However, it will not extract the other types, even with the sync on. You have to do that manually. It will change it to other types, but you have to do that manually. You can see all the textures have been extracted into singular textures, of course. That's what I mean by extract. Sometimes you may need to delete some textures. So when you select it, you click the trash can icon, which is the delete icon. It's going to delete all the selected textures. In this case, these 3 blank textures. They should now be removed. Another important setting is the texture format. What formats are these in? Or what format would destination be? You can change that. Just be careful, this is semi-destructive because the selected texture that have been imported will actually change. So for example, if you make them into a single channel, the other channels will be deleted, and unless I want to import them once more, they're going to stay like that. Another setting is the UDIM layout method. By default, it is UDIM, which is columns of 10. We can have these 3 other choices. First, let's actually change the column first. Now, by itself, it's not going to do anything. We're going to select 4 columns and we're going to set it to custom. The columns only work when it is when the UDIM layout method is set to custom. So you can see that the columns have become 4 now. It has rearranged itself. The other one is the smallest square horizontal and smallest square vertical. What this does, it will try to make it as rectangular as possible with the least amount of wasted space. This is sort of useful for hard drive disk. I think for runtime there is not much impact, but for storing it on the hard drive, it is going to make a difference in size. Likewise, for the vertical, it's sort of going to flip the column and the rows. So now it becomes 5 by 4, basically. And now I'm noticing, I think the custom, which I set to 4, I should have set it to another number because the other 2 methods were kind of the same. I should have set it to another for a better showcase, that is. We have the suffix override, sort of gonna override the suffix, which currently is base color. You want to override it, and there is this texture save override, and basically it's gonna rewrite the texture that has been selected here. So if you want to override texture instead of making a new one, you have to click the texture and add it to the texture save. There is the bake button. You can click that, wait for a bit, and as you can see, it changed to another type and the texture have been added. It is saying it's 10 by 2, basically 10 columns and 2 rows. And this is the resulting UDIM texture. Changing back to base color again for a better showcase. I'm gonna demonstrate what I meant by the texture save override. Basically, let's actually change the current UDIM selection. Let's add another texture. So let's say you have changed your mind, you are adding more textures to your current selection, but you already have made your UDIM. So how can we gonna do it? How can we modify it? We're going to demonstrate that. First, this is the name that the resultant texture will be, and this is the suffix override. We're going to override the suffix. First, actually, let's actually save it again or bake it again. The same path. You can see it is actually making a new texture. If it already exists with the same name, it's going to make a new texture instead of overriding it. However, what we want here, let's delete it. Then we got this one. We're gonna select it and and make the texture save override there. You can do it by drag or drop. Then, as you can see, when you bake it again, you can see the last texture have been changed, have been updated. Now this is what the override does. Basically, overrides the current selected texture. There is this one path before option currently off by default. Basically, it's going to search one folder before the textures has been selected. Kind of useful when the textures you're trying to find are not in the same folder. It is sort of helpful in that. The global delay should be set to something low like that usually, unless there is a race condition or something of that sort. Usually shouldn't happen, but it's there just in case. Now I mentioned that there are utilities, and we're going to showcase them now. Now you may be thinking that this is sure is great, but it is not easy to change your workflow for already made meshes. A mesh made, for example, like this weapon, this beautiful weapon here, should be duplicated now. I don't think we're gonna need to duplicate it anyways, because I'm gonna showcase something along with it as well. This is a beautiful weapon, very nicely made, but it has lots of material slots, in which case it is going to result in higher draw calls, whether you're using nanite or not. Let's first look at the UVs of it, using the UV, I think it's called the UDIMEditor plugin. It's a built-in plugin, you can enable it. You can see it's not UDIM. And as a side note, the utility that I'm about to show does work for skeletal meshes as well. And you can select multiple meshes at the same time. We go to the script action and then UDIMEditor, and then we click mesh UV to UDIM. Let's see, and we're gonna be hit with this column width. We're gonna go with the standard 10, which is the UDIM standard. You can change it to whatever you like. And so you can see that we only have one material now. Let's look at the UVs first. Well, voila, you've made yourself a mesh with UDIM UVs. So now what's left for you to do is to make the textures, or make the UDIM texture from the already existing textures, and make that a material. You can use Ctrl-Z to undo your action to make it how it was, in case you mess something up, so don't be afraid of that. And the second utility is, let's actually showcase it. If you want to add a new column, is not going to be as much easy, especially in larger, vertically larger UDIMs. And horizontal is sort of easy, but if you're going to add another column, it's going to be a bit hard, especially here. Now, the second utility, it will help with that. It's going to add a column to the end of it, meaning add blank textures. I should have named it into a better one, like add column, add blank column. As seen here, a new column have been added to the end, and this is sort of good if you want to expand your current UDIM selection. You're gonna, or if you think of adding new textures to it, you can use this sort of helper utility. Now I may add new utilities in the future depending on the request, or if I find something that's useful. Now a question may arise, and that's for non-square textures, a rectangular texture like this with 4K by 2K, which means a ratio of 2 to 1. Yes, you can make a UDIM out of this, but each UDIM tile have to be the same aspect ratio. It doesn't matter which aspect ratio it is, as long as each tile having the same aspect ratio, and it is determined by the first texture that's been added. Now if you want to change the texture, for example, you can just drag it over that texture, and it is going to change that texture to the new one. So now we have this new texture. Likewise, it should take effect for the other types of the textures as well. Now you can have different tile resolution. For example, in this case, which is an aspect ratio of 2 to 1, you can have an 8K by 4K texture, or 2K by 1K. In this case, you can have it in each one in different tiles. There is no issue with that. So now let's try to make this new one. And there it is. You got your own texture. It tells you the imported resolution along with how many tiles there on the top right. And there should not be an issue. So what happens if you try to add a texture that's not compatible, or that's not the same aspect ratio as the currently selected ones? Well, we're gonna find out what's gonna happen now. Browsing to the textures. Let's get the textures in this project. Let's get our 4K textures, and I'm good. These are why isn't there texture? Oh, it's because the folder that's been, it's not a root folder that I have selected. Now these are square textures. They have the same aspect ratio. Let's actually try to adding them. This one, for example, let's try adding that to that texture, and you can see the warning there. The set texture is not an aspect ratio of 2:1. So don't worry, it will automatically try to filter that out for you. Depending on the first texture, because the first texture that you add is going to determine the aspect ratio. Now let's look at how much resource the plugin take. Well, the plugin is mostly dependent on the memory. That's where the textures are being temporarily stored. So let's make a huge UDIM. In this case, we got 111 textures selected. We clicked on the import. It's gonna take some time. You can see the memory or RAM is being filled up. 111 4K textures is a lot, and you have to remember that there may be a UDIM inside of this, so that also takes part. You can see it's rising, and yeah, it is going to take a while. I will try to speed this up. Hopefully I put a timer so you know how long does it take on my 11th gen CPU. Never mind, I do not need to speed it up. I have a 13th gen Intel CPU with it's pretty powerful for these sort of tasks. More than powerful enough. Not surely not the strongest CPU, but it is very good. And I have 64 gigabytes of RAM as well in my or memory in my system, so I can actually make much larger UDIM if I want to. However, it's gonna take a long time, and I do not want to do that. So we have it added. Surely that was not more than 2 minutes, right? I think so. So that's quite good for the amount of 4K textures that you have loaded. And you can see that we are only at around 19 gigabytes, and this is for Unreal, like considering the plus the editor, we started at like 7, I think. So for this it takes about less than 13 gigs for this amount of textures, which is actually not bad. Be mind that the textures are the source for, or like not the source code, but the source format of the textures. So it's the pure texture and not compressed. So shall we make a UDIM? We're gonna leave this on as well. Oh, and there is that refresh button. What it does is that it will try to basically filter it out again, filter the textures to make sure that they are the correct ratio and whatnot once more, just in case if something escaped the first check. You can use that. So now we are making our big UDIM. Yep, we have our large UDIM, and we got the normal map already loaded, and we can see that we are already at 31 because the newly made texture is also sort of loaded. We haven't saved our newly baked UDIM, and for this one we're gonna overwrite the suffix just to showcase. We're gonna change the name and change the suffix override as well, and we're gonna bake this one as well while monitoring our texture size. You can see the size is sort of small, the size change for this new selection, because not all of them have an ambient occlusion, or maybe this is ambient occlusion of this metallic packed texture. Yep, it is packed, but there are only a few of them that have the corresponding texture that have the plugin detected it. So yep, we are around 34 gigabytes of total use now with this. Let's save this actually. Let's see if it will decrease the size. I mean, it should, by default, it should reduce the size. Come on. It did not actually let me. It's gonna take, I think if you change the map or restart the map, load it again, the memory will be cleaned up. But this is our large UDIM, 4K for each tile, and it is 10 columns and 12 rows. That's huge. Let's take a look at our normal map. Now you may find some tiles that are fully blue. Those are the textures that the normal maps have not been found for them. Now let's change the number of columns to more than 10, because every UDIM in Unreal is a virtual texture, but not all virtual textures are UDIM. Basically, UDIMs in Unreal or larger tile, depending tiling text, not the tiling texture, texture tiles that are above the 0-1 range in Unreal are not limited to a column of 10. You can have it, I don't know the exact number, but you can stretch it a lot in both the positive vertical direction and the positive horizontal direction as well, because you are not limited to that. So you can make your own conventional convenience depending on your project needs, so you are not required to stick to the UDIM convention, which is a column of 10. Now this will take a long time, so I'm gonna talk about something else, which would be the support. Now, one of the methods, there are multiple methods that you can use to get support or ask questions about the plugin. One of them is through the comment section of the videos on this channel, or especially the videos that are related to the specific plugins. Another way would be email, and the third method, which I think would be the fastest for response, would be Discord. I made a Discord channel that you can join and ask questions about this plugin, or just on general 3D stuff if you have questions or whatnot. Now I may speed this up a little bit as it may take time. Finally, we can see that we have loaded the texture. What we're going to do right now is showcase that we can actually, I will overwrite the normal map to this one. We're gonna keep an eye out for the memory. I know there was a way in Unreal you could monitor your PC spec through, I think, in the toolbar or something like that. But I personally, at the moment, I cannot recall what it was. So that should be about it. This is the one with the 15 columns. You can see that on the top right also tells you how many. This is the normal, that for the first one that we did. This is the second. Same textures, different layout. And just for sanity check, cannot believe that. I think the last map doesn't show anything. You're gonna look at the maps for the other general texture. It's map 3. Just so you know that the quality, like the texture, is actually as it's advertised. Now, one thing to be mind of when you are working with UDIMs, I highly recommend that you disable autosave. That kind of messes things up and makes the editor unresponsive sometimes until it finishes. So now let's look at the content folders for the plugin. Now if you go, you should have the engine and plugins in your root folder available. If it's not, enable it in the setting. Make sure those are ticked so you can see it. Go to the plugins, into the UDIMEditor. There should be two. But first you go for this one. And you should have three folders. UI editor utilities is like this, and the blueprint version, which I may not release it in this version, maybe in future versions if there are enough interest. These are the sort of the widgets that are inheriting from the C++. You can change some of the layouts, some of the changes, as can be seen, change the placement of the icons, these sort of cosmetic changes. You can do it changing the colors. It all depends on you if you want to change it. And any of the settings when you launch the UDIMEditor, if you want that change to be sort of permanent, you change it from here. And by here I mean this widget blueprint. You search for the variable and you change the value here. Otherwise, the change that you actually do when the widget is active or the editor is active, it's only going to apply for that session. When you close it, it will not have the same, or it will revert to the default settings again, unless you change it from here. If you change it from here, whenever you launch it, this is the setting that it should start with. Now, truth to be told, I didn't bother to make it into a config that you can change it through the plugin settings, but if there is enough interest in that, I might do that in the future. Hope you like it. If you have any questions, like I said, make sure to contact me through whether YouTube, Discord, or email. I highly recommend the Discord as it is usually faster. Have a great day.